Welcome back to Social Impact Live, friends, and another episode of How I Stay Positive While Building a Social Enterprise. This version of the episode focused also on social change, but specifically is focused on the business side of that equation. How do you stay positive while building a social enterprise from a business perspective? On the last episode, which this is a two-part series, so on the previous episode, the first part of this, I talked about the mindsets that I sort of embody in order to create change in society, but not get sucked into the many different directions I could be pulled in, not find myself off center in general, not feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of all the challenges we face as a society. What I want to talk about today, though, is, again, as a social entrepreneur, how do you stay positive whenever you are thinking through the different business models that you might run, how you're going to continue to stay in operation, how you're going to make money, how you're going to build a baseline for your own life. At least these are the questions that I was asking early in my career. When I started off as a social impact designer, as a social innovator, as a social entrepreneur, I didn't really have a great formula for how to go about that. I was a product designer at the time, and I was trying to figure out how can I create something that I can sell, that can benefit the world, that I can make money off of at the same time to provide a baseline for my life. And at the time, I was actually a tutor. That's how I was making money to pay my bills every single day, which gave me the time to think more about how I could build my enterprise, right? I was tutoring kids in the Bay Area and had figured out how to get that down to a certain number of hours, get my expenses down to a certain amount so that I could really spend the time pouring into this. And I remember early on in this process when I had first begun to make some money. So my first endeavors were actually, my first company was a social impact company. It was designing wind turbines to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and also generate power for people in industrializing nations who didn't have access to electricity. That company didn't end up succeeding, and I had to switch. The first endeavor that I went into on the DC design side wasn't actually a social enterprise. It was laser cutting and engraving as a service, and I was producing, before that even, these maps that I had designed, right? So that was really the first product-based business type exchange that I ever had. Then I went into a service-based business where I was laser cutting for companies in the Bay Area. But I remember that being really exciting for me, that moment when I was actually making money, when people were paying me for my services, when someone wanted what I had to offer, when they would call every single day, and I could say, oh yeah, it's going to be this much money, and we could agree to that, and they would pay me for it. And that was a huge milestone for me. But it was around that time also where I was asking this question around how to keep my head above water as an entrepreneur. And I went for a walk around the block. And I think what I'm going to say here applies to social enterprise and social entrepreneurs, which I quickly pivoted into and moved into after the laser cutting and engraving phase. But basically, I was on a walk around the block, and I remember thinking about the money that was coming in, the calls that were coming in, and thinking to myself, man, I really can't wait until this instability dies down. When the people who are calling, when there's a solid baseline of income that comes every single month. And I started to think about it, and I recognized a few things. One thing that I recognize is that every business in the world, social enterprise or not, has instability. What I mean by that is that for every business in the world, there is a fluctuation in the revenue made per month and the profits that come from that. Now, there might be some predictability to that after a while, and I'll get into that in a moment, but every business at the top line sees fluctuations. You cannot predict down to the dollar amount exactly how much money you're going to make every single month. But this idea of stability had sat with me, and I wondered why that was. I realized something else, which is that the stability, this concept of consistency, that's something that it's a benefit that is afforded to employees of an organization generally. Those who have a set amount that they expect to make every single month gives them a set of type of reliability. And I thought about this at a time when I was running this business, but I actually wasn't taking a single dollar out of it. I had hired a couple of people. I was paying those people. They were running different services for the business. They were making money. They were making money on a more consistent basis. I was actually not making money yet at this time, and I was thinking, that is the difference. As an owner, as a founder, right? You live with the instability always, and so I got really comfortable in that phase, comfortable recognizing that there are ups and downs in the income flow, and I'm always going to see those, and I am always going to feel those. And it's been almost 10 years now, and so I've sat with that reality this whole time. And come to just accept it. So that was the first point, and that's the first mindset that I would offer to you as a helpful point as you navigate your world as a social entrepreneur. There will be instability, there will be ups and downs. Can you get traction though? Are there people who want your services? Is it possible to sell what you're trying to sell, whether it's a service or it's a product or it's information in some way or it's events that you organize, whatever that might be? Figure out, are there people who want that? The second point is, as I was on that walk around the block, right? I studied sustainable design in college for my master's, and what I was focused on with my first company was designing wind turbines that would generate power that would interface with the United States electricity grid. And I thought about some knowledge that I had from that space. When you look at renewable energy across the country, and this is going to apply, I promise. When you look at renewable energy, right, what you see as it interfaces with the grid is that any one source, any one point source of power creates unstable power. So one wind turbine is only generating power when the wind is blowing, and when the wind's not blowing, it's not generating power, it's not feeding that into the grid. One solar panel is generating power when the sun is shining. When a cloud comes overhead, it's not feeding power into the grid. And so you get these ups and downs in power generation. But there's something that's really interesting that happens the more renewable energy you throw into the grid. I'm talking more solar panels, more wind turbines, more hydroelectric power. All of these different sources combined together, even if you remove hydroelectric because that's a little bit more stable, all of these different sources, just wind and solar, when you have them in enough locations and you have enough sources feeding in, you actually start to get a really nice baseline of power that is generated. So you'll look at it and it'll look like there's all these fluctuations still on the high end, right, on the top side, but you have a baseline that you can rely on all the time, right? The solar panels have fed power into the batteries, and the batteries are storing that and they're feeding that back into the grid, and that's become reliable enough to shift this level, this baseline up. Same thing is true for the wind turbines, right? They're generating power at certain times. That's become reliable enough to shift that power up. They're spread out enough that some of them are getting wind at different times. And so you end up with that. And I realized that model is a really good model for what's happening in a business, right? Every business, you're trying to shift up the baseline so that you have some reliability that you can believe in, that you can rely on, that you can make decisions based on. But as the founder, as the entrepreneur, you need to recognize that you're still going to see these fluctuations at the top. And so I started to think about that. How do I shift up the baseline of the work that I'm doing? And I still think about that now as I do my work going into my 10th year of doing all this. So that's another mindset just to keep in mind, is that if you have an influx of multiple, well, let's see, one mindset here is that as an entrepreneur, right, you're looking to shift at that baseline overall. So that's one mindset. The other is, how do you get there? And that is multiple streams of income. Right? And this is probably a phrase or a concept that you've heard about in other regards as well. But multiple streams is similar to the multiple types of electricity, the multiple point sources of power generation from solar and wind turbines that are coming in. If you can have those multiple sources, you can recognize that sometimes one of them is going to be really needed, and people are going to be eager to get your services for that specific thing that you're offering. Other times it's going to be something else that's really needed. And if you can pull income from multiple things, you can shift up that baseline. So when I think about DC Design right now, I say that we do three things. We do strategy work, which includes going out into communities to learn about the needs of the people who are most affected by a challenge, and make sure that the organizations we're working with are able to take those key priorities into account. We help them develop what those priorities are and actually package those strategies into a framework that continues to be collaborative with communities. That's the strategy side. We design solutions to the problems that we've defined with the organization. So this is service design and event design and and product design and all these pieces, right? We've developed apps, we've developed services, we've developed all sorts of things alongside our clients in order to solve that problem. And then third, we teach people how to do what we do, right? So even within DC Design, within my main business, right, I have different income streams. There are some of these that are more needed than others. Online education turned out to be really important during COVID. And we were able to do things there while we weren't able to do as much of going out into the community as would have been normal, for example, right? So that is the next mindset, is that bringing in these multiple streams of income in some way, shape, or form helps you to formulate a baseline that you can rely on and continue to move forward even when times get tough elsewhere. So the last one that I would offer you is this mindset of innovation itself, right? So it can be challenging when you're not seeing the numbers you want, but the thing that keeps me going, the thing that gives me hope all the time, is the recognition that my goal is impact. My goal is to help other people, right? To get specific, right? My goal is to increase the number of English language learner students enrolling their kids in pre-K so that those kids can have great early childhood educational outcomes, which will lead to better life outcomes down the line. My goal is to reduce the number of people returning to jail after they leave jail, because that will benefit them in the long run, benefit their families, benefit the community as a whole in the long run, and better enable everyone involved in this equation to achieve their dreams. Right? My goals are impact-based. I use a market-driven approach in some way to get there, which is ultimately that me and my team offer our services to the organizations and communities that are on the front lines of doing this work to try to help bring the knowledge we have to that equation as well, the knowledge and the processes that we have. But given that the goal is impact, right, the recognition that I need to make is that there are lots of ways to get there. One of the ways, right, is to have certain customers you can charge more money to, and then you can charge less money to other customers in order to do work that they couldn't really afford. And that is one possible model, right, that exists. Tom's had a model that was, the extreme version of that, Tom's Shoes, right, where you buy a pair of Tom's shoes and they give away a pair of shoes itself. In this case, instead of it being a direct product giveaway that we're doing, we reduce the price for some clients that we really want to work with or we're able to work with, if we're able to get enough other clients who can afford to pay the full price. So that's a model, for example. Other models are that you are a hybrid organization in some way, and you have donations that fund part of what you do, and you have sales that fund another part of what you do. Another is that maybe you are you become a connective tissue organization instead. So instead of being someone who provides direct services within communities, you are someone who links a bunch of different organizations, nonprofits, foundations together in a way where they're able to pay you a nominal fee each, right? And you're able to provide services to all of them. So these are all just different creative ways, different business models for how you can run and build a social enterprise. And I wanted you to be aware of all those because basically a lot of my hope comes down to recognizing that there's still a path forward. When there's no path forward, that's when I have to pivot my thinking altogether. But with multiple streams of income possible, with different business models that are possible, with a recognition that instability is a normal part of the equation, and so I don't have to freak out when I see that. With all these mindsets in place, I am able to stay positive even when things get challenging. I am able to believe in the midst of a global pandemic when businesses are going out of business left and right that mine will not. And it will not because I have these sound principles that it's built on, and I recognize what needs to be done to get to the next phase, right? And so, in the pandemic, things were really, really challenging for us, but we made it through by making good, sound decisions. And then now we are at a point where we are on path to have our best year ever financially and impact-wise. I really am excited about that. So would love to hear from you in the comments how this resonates with you. What challenges are you struggling with as a social entrepreneur, as a social innovator? What questions do you have about the finance side of running a business, or about the social impact side of running a business and what you're trying to do there as well? As always, like, follow, and subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow on another episode of Social Impact.